Arrow, 8 Ways Season 5 has saved the show. Oliver Queen is back to saving his city, and has saved his series in the process. In the modern superhero era, Arrow was the show that sparked the genre into life on television. While the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Chris Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy were both killing it at the box office, it took the arrival of a show based on a more realist comics character to kickstart the revolution on TV. With 2 years of dark, grounded action, the show spawned an entire Arrowverse of comic book hits, and to an extent paved the way for hit Marvel series Daredevil. Despite this start, Arrow completely fell behind the pack. Over seasons 3 and 4, the originator of the trend went out of style, delivering bleak episode after bleak episode, and getting weighed down in everything from soap opera relationships to magical villains and everyone coming back from the dead. Season 5, then, was make or break. Arrow had long lost critical approval, and the trust of its fans as well. Had this year not turned things around, then the show might not have seen a season 6. While it hasn't managed to prevent a ratings slide, though Arrow has never been huge in that department anyway, they are the lowest they've ever been, it has made a great turnaround in quality. Please subscribe my channel 8. Cutting back on the magic. Arrow started off about as grounded as a superhero show can be, with the onus very much on using weapons and hand-to-hand combat, and when characters die, as they often did, they'd stay that way, meaning the deaths of Tommy Merlin and Moira Queen packed a real punch. However, the arrival of The Flash completely changed this world by introducing metahumans, and Arrow tried to adapt rather than just doing its own thing. It introduced the League of Assassins, and with it the resurrecting capabilities of the Lazarus Pit. Later it introduced Damien Darhk and his mystical dark forces. There was magic in the air, but not in the scripts. Characters came back from the dead, but the show felt like it was dying. This season has largely cut back on all of the magic and mysticism that's plagued the last couple of seasons. While Flash and Legends of Tomorrow can deal with metahumans and time travel, Arrow undoubtedly works best on a more purely human level. There was an element of the mystic with Rory, but it wasn't overdone nor a key part of the plot. For the most part it's been left behind, returning to grounded days of earlier, and that's definitely paid off. 7. Dark, but not depressing. One of the appealing things in the early days of Arrow was that it embraced the darkness. This was not a world of caped superheroes swooping in to save the day, but real, flawed people, with a vigilante consumed by his own inner darkness and demons. It never shied away from hard-hitting moments, but it was always fun and entertaining to watch regardless. Over the course of seasons 3 and 4, however, the show took a rather more depressing turn. It wasn't just that it was dark, but it was downright miserable, constantly piling things on top of each other until it became too much to stand watching. And that despite the fact season 4 promised to be lighter, after the misery of season 3. Season 5 has just about got the balance right again. It's still dark, as witnessed in the personal battle between Prometheus and Green Arrow, but there are more moments of levity and lightness too. Felicity and Curtis both provide a lot of humor, the former after being terribly written for a couple of years, and even Oliver has shown he's prepared to crack a joke or at least a smile. It's never going to be The Flash or Supergirl, and nor should it be, but that doesn't mean it should be completely joyless either. Season 5 has managed to get this back on track. 6. Interesting flashbacks that tie to the present. The flashbacks weren't the only issue with Arrow over the last couple of years, but they were a very obvious stick with which to beat the show. In truth, this was a problem even when the show was at its peak, as it didn't always land in making the island scenes interesting, but more often than not there was a clear story to be told and it ran parallel to the present day. That was lost in season 3 when Ollie went to Hong Kong. A story stretched over 20-plus episodes that could have been told in about 2. There was almost nothing happening, nor did it offer much to compare to the current storyline. Season 4 promised Coast City, which seemed exciting if only for the Hal Jordan link, but then went back to Lian Yu, and got bogged down in magic and mysterious plots. For Season 5, the show has finally gone to Russia, albeit a few seasons after that was a truly pressing concern. Nonetheless, it's worked, largely thanks to the presence of Anatoly Nazv, as well as Dolph Lundgren as the villainous Cover. As Oliver is inducted into Bratva and forced to kill, as well as his meeting with Talia, there are clear parallels to his present story, but most of all it's actually presenting an interesting and exciting plot in its own right. Furthermore, it's bringing the story closer to the beginning of Arrow, meaning that in Season 6 the show can start to leave them behind a little more, if not completely. 5. Mayor Queen and a renewed focus on Star City. Arrow has never been an overtly political show, but that's something that's had to change, to a degree, with Season 5, since it finds Oliver Queen serving as mayor of Star City. This hasn't led to a great change in social commentary, a shame, since it's a big part of the character in the comics, but has meant a renewed focus on Star City, and the politics around cleaning up the city's problems. As with most heroes, Arrow works best when it's focused on the ties between its hero and his home turf, and while it has been under attack in previous seasons, it's either been part of a bigger plot, that is a nuclear attack, or from mystical forces, or both, kinda. This year with Oliver serving as mayor there's a much clearer link between protagonist and city, and it's worked better in establishing the stakes and Oliver's dual role of protecting the city as both an elected official and a vigilante. It has dipped its toes into the current political climate too, by tackling the issue of gun control. Admittedly, it didn't do the best job of this. The beginning of that episode was particularly ham-fisted, and Felicity really should have had a say given she was shot and paralyzed, but it did at least offer a balanced debate on the matter. 4. Nolan. Few elements of Arrow have seemingly divided the fanbase over the last couple of years than Nolan, or rather the shipping and subsequent realization of Oliver and Felicity being together. On paper the idea should have worked, given the great chemistry between Stephen Amell and Emily Bett-Rickards, but the relationship proved too dominant to the plot and resulted in both characters being worse off. After a lot of being on and then off, and teases of getting back together, Season 5 has pretty much completely ignored the idea of the two being an item. Both characters have embarked on new relationships. Sure, Oliver killed Felicity's boyfriend, but he didn't mean it, and their dynamic has been closer to the first couple of years, with them working together and being the wiser heads helping the new recruits. There's still a chance the pair might end up together later down the line, and that's potentially fine, depending how and when it happens. For now though it's very much been off the table, meaning the show has moved away from a lot of the soap opera elements that dominated too much of proceedings in recent years, and that's definitely a good thing. 3. A grounded set of villains. One problem with Arrow is that no villain is ever going to match Slade Wilson, Deathstroke from Season 2. Not only was Manu Bennett a great fit for the role, but it was right place right time. Arrow was hitting its stride, Flash hadn't came along yet, it had stakes that were incredibly personal, and delivered some of the best action on TV between two well-matched characters with a shared history we'd spent a long time exploring. It's not much of a surprise, then, that Ra's al Ghul and Amy and Darth didn't come close to living up to that. Matt Noble was a solid if unspectacular Ra's, not quite nailing the required presence and suffering from other issues around the league. Neil McDonough was quite brilliant in his role, but the character's powers were too out there, his purpose too broad, and it took Arrow too far away from its grounded nature. This season we were promised a return to the earlier days, with a villain who was a direct result of Oliver's actions as the Hood, and that's what we've received in Prometheus. He's a terrifying foe and serves as a dark mirror to Oliver, and made for an excellent, and genuinely surprising, twist, with Josh Segarra increasingly great and unhinged as Adrian Chase. It's not all Prometheus either. Chad Coleman's Tobias Church was an excellent foil to re-establish the street-level threat and then bump up from Ethos' billing. Vigilante isn't too far off being as much of a threat as Prometheus and remains a big mystery, and Talia al Ghul is an effective way of tying back to both the show's past and Oliver's. They're all pretty grounded, focused on hand-to-hand or bow and arrow combat, and give the show its gritty feel back. 2. A retooled Team Arrow. While Diggle and Felicity have remained ever-present, or near enough, on Team Arrow, the rest of it has underwent a few changes. First they brought in Roy Harper, Arsenal, mostly to perform a bunch of awesome-looking but ultimately unnecessary Parker. Then Laurel's Black Canary stepped up, as did Thea as Speedy. By last year, though, those team dynamics were all over the place. Laurel had already been sidelined a fair bit, and was eventually killed off. Roy had left the scene long before that. And Thea couldn't be involved without completely losing herself. Season 5 kicked off with just Oliver and Felicity left in the Arrow Cave, though it was always just a matter of time before Dig returned, and set about establishing a new team. While it was interesting to see Ollie go solo for a spell, it's also been great for the character to be taking people under his wing. It's expanded the dynamics of Team Arrow and given us differing pairings and relationships, and also allowed Oliver a lot of growth as a person. It helps that the new members all bring something, or brought something, in some cases. Rory was powerful and brought a more spiritual element to the show. Dinah, Tina is a fitting way of honoring and continuing the Black Canary legacy. Curtis brings a lot of humor and is completing the transformation into Mr. Terrific, and Renee, Wild Dog, has had the most development of the bunch, becoming a particularly interesting character in a short space of time. With new members and fresh dynamics, Team Arrow has its edge back, and so too does the series. 1. Back to basics in the action scenes. One of the phrases that was often repeated ahead of Season 5 was back to basics. Almost everyone involved with the show, and in particular Stephen Amell, acknowledged that they'd strayed too far from their roots, and had to find a way of getting back there. With the added emphasis on Star City and grounded villains that move away from magic and mysticism, they've managed it, but the biggie they had to get right was the action. While it's had its moments over the last couple of years, the mountaintop sword fight with Roz, Thea's elevator fight with Andy, they've been too few and far between, and Green Arrow actually using his iconic weaponry felt like a rarity. Season 5 changed this right from the off, giving us an absolutely blistering, knockout one-take fight sequence in the season premiere, which set the tone for the action sequences to come. Since then we've had plenty of great, grounded scraps, and you can tell they've made a renewed effort on the choreography and editing of these scenes, led by James Bamford. The Arrow, Legends Against Past Foes in the 100th episode was stellar, as were Oliver's brutal fights in Russia, and his recent clashes with Prometheus. They're fast, furious, and violent, which is everything the action on this show should be. What do you think of Arrow Season 5? Share your thoughts down in the comments.